This is Sebastian Kurian, and you're listening to Chasing Dreams with Amy J.
That was pretty impressive for someone who doesn't podcast. First take and whatnot. That was pretty impressive. All right.
I guess part of being a lawyer, public speaking, and
That's true.
there's statement behind it as well. So
all right, fair enough. I'm glad she butchered this on my first. All right. Hey, Dream Chasers, this is Amy J. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 210, which is, crazy to me that we're there. We're also into November of 2019. How crazy is that? So hopefully you guys are well into your dream chase journey. You're working on it. You're doing your thing. Officially, I want to thank you guys because in October for birthday month, we raised $1,408 for Mental Health America. And I'm so grateful and thankful for you guys for the support you gave for that. I know it's late, but this is the first recording we did after that and the first one you'll be able to hear. So I wanted to make sure I put it out there. Thank you guys for all of that support. Couldn't have done it without you. And we're just going to keep the fun going because I have a friend of mine here. Yeah, everybody's a friend. But, Sebastian's a good friend. He is a corporate counsel at Google supporting its energy and location strategy team. Before that, he was at Amazon, corporate counsel again, where he was the lead global utilities lawyer for Amazon Web Services. Not only that, he was the assistant general counsel of Clark Construction. He worked at Miles and Stockbridge. He's a Malayali. He's a friend. He was from Baltimore. It's just, I had to have him on, right? When I first started going into law school and thinking, what other Indians, Malayalis in particular, which is where I'm from, which is my culture and background, I couldn't really come up with anyone. Sebastian was actually one of the first Malayalis that I knew that went into law, which was crazy because we're like, we have lawyers like us. And so we had actually talked briefly, at least, when I was considering it, and was stoked to kind of keep in touch with him throughout and see his journey. And he's here today. We're going to talk to him. We're going to have some fun. We're going to learn a lot. And I hope you enjoy. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Amy. I've been wowed by you doing this. I just think it's really cool, something totally different. I think the older I get and the more senior I sort of get in my career, I just have a lot more respect for people who do things, off the beaten path. So, congrats to you. It's been a successful podcast. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm having fun with it. And the best part, is really when I bring on people who are doing something that's not normal for their culture, for their gender, for their, religion, whatever it is. People who are doing things abnormally, but really it's not. I mean, you've gone and kind of trailblazed a path for Indian lawyers, which has been an amazing journey, right? Not only were you at a law firm, but you went from the law firm to a private company, and then you went to Amazon, and then you went to Google, and you just received the Minority Corporate Counsel Association's Rising Star Award this year. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's phenomenal. And you're still so young. You're still so young. And so this is amazing to me. And I hope you understand how important what you've done is. Even though you're not doing it for that, your actions and your journey are being seen by people. It was seen by me. It was seen by Jamie. It was important to us. So, kudos to that, by the way.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's funny because I was not really, I never defined myself as Indian growing up. I mean, most of my friends were Caucasian. I was Catholic, and so the people I would worship with were not minorities. And so I sort of rejected that side for a really long time. And it probably wasn't until I got to Amazon where I got woke, so to speak, where I started to realize that, it's important. One, I recognize the fact that I am a minority. I recognize the fact that when people see me or interact with me, they see me as a minority. And I've totally embraced trying to be a role model for others who look like me or are in similar situations and trying to get where they're trying to get to.
And, it's not an easy path doing something that's different, right? I mean, I know you didn't intentionally choose it for that purpose or anything like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you did. But why law? Like, have you always wanted to be a lawyer? Was that something in you?
Yeah. So I get this question a lot, and I really wish I had one of those answers. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I wanted to fight for justice, or I had this situation happen in my life, and it really
The
drove
story
me to
that
go to law
TVs are
school.
made of, TV shows are made of?
Yeah, exactly. For me, it was nothing like that, to be honest. It was more, I was in college, had really no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I had so many different interests. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll go to law school, buy 3 extra years to figure out what it is I want to do with my life. So that's really what led me to law school.
Hmm.
There's no sort of, Cinderella-like story behind it, unfortunately. But it turned out in hindsight to be, I'm super happy where I am today. So it turned out to be a good decision. I would not recommend people do that today. I
Fair.
think you should, have a general sense of why you want to go to law school. It's certainly not cheap. But, for me, it worked out.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second because of all the options you could pick, right? If you wanted extra time, there was the dental side of life, there's medical side of life, there's all these other options. Was there something about law though that made it seem like, hey, this is acceptable?
Well, the medical field, dental field, anything with science and math was sort of off the table for me because I was horrible at math. I was horrible at chemistry. I was horrible at all that stuff. But what I was really interested in, I was a political science major at Penn. I really liked political science. I liked things in business. I just thought that a law degree would be versatile and it would really help me build off of the strengths that I had. So that's why it was a natural fit. But like you said, our community, I don't think there were any lawyers, certainly not folks who worked at big law firms. So I was going into it very blind and had no idea what I was sort of getting myself into.
Yeah, and oddly enough, that's one of the reasons I went to law school is the versatility of what you can
Yep.
do after you get that degree. But again, really kind of be sure what you want to do, guys, because it's an expensive versatility,
Yeah.
for that education. It really is. But then you come out and, you're not wrong in that it's a whole new world for Indians, really. And for you to kind of go in, you see what you see on TV in movies about corporate law firms and what it is. Was it the same for you being a minority or even as someone coming in as a lawyer? Or did you have a different experience?
It's also funny, I didn't really have that story that a lot of people have in going to law school. The other thing was I actually was never interested in TV shows or movies around the law. I just really had no
You
interest in
never
any of
watched
that
The
stuff.
Firm, John Grisham
No,
movies?
I think the only legal movie or show that I really enjoyed was A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise. That was pretty much it. So yeah, I didn't really have preconceived notions of what it would be like working at a big law firm. I guess it was a little shocking to me in that I came from a very blue collar family, and again, I didn't. And our community tended to be very blue collar. You didn't have folks who worked in, investment banking
Mm-mm,
or big law
we did
firms
not.
or some of those white shoe professions. And so I guess in my mind, I had this impression of what life would be like day to day, and honestly, it's nothing like that. And I loved my experience at Miles and Stockbridge. It was a great law firm to start with. But working at a big law firm, going through that grind was just something that like I cannot see myself doing now, and certainly would not have had a long-term sustainable career doing that.
So for those who are interested in law or like, hey, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about this big law firm life. Um, is what they say about working long hours, right? Not just 40-hour weeks, but maybe even 60, 70-hour weeks. Is that still a true representation so that people can kind of have a sense of it if they're listening in now?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I think 60, 70 hours a week is probably a good week,
I was going
a
to say
very
that
reasonable
might
week.
be low.
Yeah, no, exactly. My my biggest thing was I felt like I was on call 24/7.
Mhm.
And so it was really hard to unplug and have a life outside of the office. I mean, I remember when I was going away for a long weekend, it was actually to Puerto Rico. I was going to propose to my then girlfriend, then fiance, and now wife. And a partner like dumped some project on me the Friday before I was supposed to leave. And thankfully, I had teammates who were like, we know you have a big weekend plan. We're willing to pitch in and help
Oh,
you out with
great.
this. But I mean, that's rare. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people that I know or situations when I was at a law firm where weekend plans were totally rejiggered because of work that would pop up.
Yeah. And guys, I'm not saying that this is only law firms. Other jobs and occupations have that kind of a lifestyle. But, if you see on TV, and we often say, what you see on TV isn't a great reflection. Here's someone who is not on TV yet, maybe, but has gone through it and is kind of like, hey, that is the life. Now,
Yeah, there's a lot of boring document review, a lot of filling in the blanks. It's not very glamorous.
it's not, but I can imagine even you when you went to corporate, right, working for Clark, uh, that probably was it the same amount of work? Was it less? Was going from a law firm to private corporate different?
Yeah, well, so it is different. And whether it was Clark or Amazon or Google, what I always tell people is that my days, whether at any of those three companies, are actually more intense than they ever were at a law firm. But the nice thing is, once 6 o'clock, whatever rolls around, it's much easier to unplug from the day and focus on whatever it is that I want to focus on. These days, I read a lot, so that's what I do at night, and it's easier for me to get away during weekends and actually take vacations. But the intensity of the day is very different, just because your clients are really busy, during that 8-9 hour period. They also tend to have lives at the end of the day, and so they're not trying to bother you all too much. So yeah, the number of hours are less, but I think the intensity and the challenge is a lot less as well. Or sorry, is a lot more. But the other thing is I find in working with in-house with these companies, I actually like what I do a
Hmm.
lot more, and I feel a lot more personally invested in it. So, of course, naturally that means that I'm going to take things a lot more seriously than I would have at a law firm. The whole goal at a law firm is just to pad your hours and get as many billable hours as you
Yeah,
can. In-house, it's very different. And especially at a publicly traded company, a lot of your compensation is based on stock. And so if the company does well, you do well financially. And so there's this inherent motivation built in there.
that's true. That's a very good point. Now, in all of this, what impressed me was you also did something that's rare of people in our community. Um, and that is you went from the East Coast to the West Coast. And they're not the same. Like, how do you make that kind of a leap? Because also, like, when I say it's not the same, I've been to the West Coast. I've stayed at the West Coast for a bit. West Coast has more of a laid back vibe to it, whereas
Yeah.
I think the East Coast, everybody's like, okay, we got things to do, places to be. There's a thing to it. Um, did you have any reservations about making that jump or kind of taking that leap?
Yeah, I mean, I had not lived outside of a 100-mile radius of Baltimore my
Mm-hmm.
entire life. I born and raised in Baltimore, went to college in Philly, back to law school in Baltimore, and then, lived and worked in DC a little bit. So that's all I knew.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny. I knew somebody from Seattle in college, and when I heard that he was from Seattle, I'm like, that's like in Alaska, right? Like, where the heck is Seattle? It just seems so cold, and that's sort of where the gold rush happened. So it was a super foreign concept. But at the time when Amazon reached out to me and I got the job offer there. I was at an inflection point in my career where I was super miserable at a law firm that I was working at in DC. Around the time I was diagnosed with major depression, and I was just really rethinking what it is that I want out of life and what is it that I want to do with my career and life. And so I felt like I really had nothing to lose. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was just really excited and ready for that move and that challenge. And I also, it's helpful that that my wife is a lot more adventurous than me. And she's lived in Brazil and uh, overseas in England, and she's traveled a lot, and
Wow.
she's lived all across the U.S. And so she definitely like pushed and encouraged that move. But to your point about the differences, yeah, I mean, people are so much more laid back out here on the West Coast. I think people are nicer. It's definitely less pretentious. I mean, the East Coast, there's a lot of, where'd you go to school? What do you do? People sort of define you based on your career. Here, a lot of it is, what is it that you like to do on the weekends? Where do you like to travel to on the weekends? And it's a little different between Seattle and San Francisco. San Francisco, you have a lot more of the startup mentality, and
Mm.
everybody's trying to, get their side hustle to find their next billion-dollar unicorn here or there. But still, people are super laid back. I mean, I remember when my parents visited. I think it was last Thanksgiving, and I had to go into the office, and I'm wearing t-shirt and jeans, and they're like, "Aren't you going to get ready for work?" And I'm like, "No, this is what I wear to work every day." I cannot remember the last time I wore dress slacks to the office, and I definitely don't miss that. I bring my dog to the office every once in a while, which doesn't happen on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
I moved out here and got like 2 half-sleeve tattoos on my arms, which is a big thing out of the West Coast. And I always think about like the reason why I don't go any further down on my arm is like, well, what if I ever do move back to the East Coast? Like I feel like it's just not acceptable. People
Right.
people judge it a lot more. Whereas here out on the West Coast, I mean, nobody cares, which is nice. I kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting because making that move, making a leap into a different environment, because I didn't do East Coast, West Coast. I did Baltimore, Philadelphia. And
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia is different from Baltimore just
Sure.
because Philadelphia is an old city. Nothing wrong with Philadelphia. Please don't jump me next time I'm there. But, it is different. But I think making that leap was something I had to do at that time and was definitely outside my comfort zone. And it sounds like you did
Yeah.
something as well, but you had a wife who was supportive to help you kind of make that transition. And you've been there now, what, 6, 7 years?
Yeah, I've been out on the West Coast now. It's coming up on 6 years now.
Yeah.
So I definitely, I mean, I probably, when I introduce myself, I tell people I'm from California, and yeah, I definitely feel like I'm more of a West Coaster than an East Coaster here. I mean, to your point about, um, it takes a lot of courage. It results in a lot of change. I mean, I've definitely changed as a person and a human being moving out here because you get out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
You're away from family. You're away from the friends that you grew up with. And so, I mean, your mentality, your way of thinking changes a lot. I mean, I, I, I would have never thought that, 10, 15 years ago, if I told myself, when you're in your late 30s, you're going to be in a 1 bedroom, apartment in San Francisco with a dog, no kids, I would have been like, there's no way that's going to be my life. And that's what it is today. And I'm happy about it. I'm definitely happier than the alternative. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. But what I do want to talk about is something you mentioned briefly, which was being diagnosed with depression.
Yeah.
As you were there, as you were going through life here, right? Right now, let's kind of backtrack. You were diagnosed clinically, like officially, right? This wasn't I
Yep.
feel like I'm depressed, right? You went to a doctor and
No.
you were diagnosed. One,
Yep.
it's uncommon for Indians, Malayalis.
Mm-hmm.
I think saying Indians is enough actually to go to a doctor and get diagnosed. And
Yeah.
it's another thing to accept that diagnosis as well. for those who are listening and maybe struggling, how did you build up the courage to go?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm very open about the struggles that I faced with depression and mental health issues. I mean, I would love to become more of an advocate about this. So I love the opportunity to chat about this,
Yeah.
and hopefully, it gives others sort of the courage and motivation to the extent that they're facing issues or have challenges. So, I remember, I mean, thinking back on it, I remember being in high school and just getting sad for no particular reason.
Mm.
And there would be occasions like that would happen in college and then into my career. And during those periods, I grew up in a very religious household. And so it was, well, go pray on it. Maybe that'll make you feel better. And so I would try to do that. I never thought that, you know, like depression was something that would affect me or anybody that I really knew. I thought this was something that you saw on TV or people who just wanted to put a name to something that they're sad for no particular reason. And then also, I would also think about, you hear about these celebrities or pro athletes who seem to have everything,
Yeah.
great career, um, you know, uh, great, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. And they're famous, they're rich, and they commit suicide or they have depression. And I remember thinking to myself, like, really? Like, how could those people be depressed? And I think at the time where I started to come to terms and wanted to go to a doctor, I think a lot of people looked at me and thought, here's a guy who has had a really good career. He's doing well financially. He's got a great wife. Like, what does he have to be sad about? And that was definitely a challenge to get the courage to go to a doctor and face the reality. But at the time, there were a couple things that happened. I had an uncle who was very close to me. He was sort of the first person in my family that I was really close to. He had passed away, and that led to sort of even worse feelings of depression. And I talked to a coworker actually about it and just told him about the feelings I was going through. And he was like, you should probably go see a medical professional about those issues. And he opened up to me about his battle with depression. And he was somebody who I looked at and was like, really? Like,
Yeah.
you would be depressed? Like, he was always super well dressed. He had a lot of money. He had a great family. It's like, how can you be depressed? And so I think like hearing his story and him being open with me forced me to confront things. And so, I went to a doctor and went through the typical tests that they do, and they asked different questions. And it was very clear that I was suffering from clinical depression. He had recommended therapy, which I also was a little skeptical of. I'm like, really? Like, how's this supposed to help?
Yeah.
But there was tremendous value in that. So combination of therapy and taking antidepressants, which, I think I was a little ashamed of at first and wasn't necessarily a believer, but I mean, that was a game changer. Particularly, I think one of the other motivating factors was, I mean, I had very seriously contemplated suicide, and I had thought that on several occasions, but I think it was 2011, 2012. I mean, planned out exactly how I was going to do it and was constantly thinking about of just pulling the trigger, so to speak. And that's when I was like, all right, like this is not normal.
Is that when you went to see
I
the
should.
doctor?
It was about the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see the doctor, you have the prescription. When you said it was a game changer, was it the combination of therapy and medicine, or was it the diagnosis altogether? Like, what was the game changer for you?
Yeah, I would definitely the medicine and the therapy, the combination of the two were definitely game changers. And I think for people who do suffer from depression, it has to be a dual pronged approach.
Mm-hmm.
The medicine definitely impacts the biological aspects that drive depression. And something like there's definitely a family history in our family, and Indians as a community, and it doesn't matter if you're South Indian or North Indian, they're really embarrassed about those things. They don't want to admit it or talk about it because I think parents will think, well, what is it that I did in raising my
Yes.
child that led to that depression? And that's not the thing. I mean, a lot of it is genetic, and there's no helping that. And the other side where therapy comes in is there are also experiences that you may have had in life that have been exacerbated by the biological medical aspects of it, that need to be addressed. And therapy is a great tool in doing that.
And it's a lot of cultures, guys, and not just Indians. Indians, because we can relate to it, but a lot of cultures and backgrounds, right? This isn't just a one culture thing. But for a lot of people, especially cultures, though, sometimes it's easy for them to kind of be in denial about it,
Yeah.
right? And
I mean,
just not accept it.
for Indians, a lot of it is shame. That's like a big thing in Indian
Huge
communities, is shaming your family, or
failure.
shaming your community. Whereas there are a lot of other cultures, whether it's the African American culture or the Hispanic culture, there's a lot of machismo behind it.
Mhm.
Where oh well, I'm gonna tough it out. I'm gonna deal with it on my own. I
Yeah.
don't need a doctor or some therapist to talk to me about my problem. So you're right. I mean, it is a cross-cultural issue for
It,
sure.
it absolutely is. And you were right in that it is a shame thing, in that parents and families are looked upon as, what did you do wrong versus what could
Mm-hmm.
have happened, right? But nobody
Yep.
says that about cancer or anything else. I mean, these
Yeah.
are diseases just as much as physical diseases. And the thing is, people will say is, hey, you just need to pray harder. You just need
Yep.
to pray more. And I'm like, for me, the thought is, well, I agree that we should pray, but God also provided these smart people called psychiatrists and therapists, and I should probably utilize them too, because he provided them also in my life. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it's slowly changing. It's got a long way to go, but the you are an example of someone who kind of fought that. So can I ask, if did you feel supported after you got the diagnosis and you kind of went and saw the doctor, or did you kind of get some pushback? Because sometimes there's denial also with what you hear.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely pushback from family with my parents, but what I found was I started to be very open about it with people that I was very close to as far as friends, and just a number of my friends who are people in my social circle who have dealt with this either
Mhm.
personally or through their family. It was really comforting. I mean, there was definitely this support system out there, and you'll find that people are very willing to openly talk about this stuff. I mean, it's great that it's more and more visible. It's certainly more acceptable. And I want to go back to, you mentioned, depression is an illness just like cancer
Yeah.
or a lot of these other health issues. You're absolutely right. I mean, I tried. So last year, moved to California, it's super sunny, and I got this great job at Google, and I'm thinking, maybe I'll try to wean off of antidepressants, and
Hmm.
let's see how that goes. And I tried that, and I was doing it under the supervision of a doctor, which if someone ever wants to try to do this, they should absolutely do it under the supervision of a doctor. Um, and I thought, okay, like I'm in a good place. Like I think therapy has helped. Life situation's
Yeah.
fantastic. Again, I have nothing, and it's still that old backwards way of thinking of, well, I have nothing to be depressed about, right? So let me let me wean off of these drugs. And man, I remember um, being in, like, I love fitness. I go to the gym every morning, and I'm at the gym one morning, and I just have no motivation.
Mm.
I just want to start crying for no reason. There's nothing bothering me, but I really just want to start sobbing. And those suicidal thoughts are coming back, and I'm like, all right, like I'll just go to the Bay Bridge over there and just end it. Like
Right.
I just want to finish it. And thankfully, and I don't know, and you know, I'm not a religious person anymore, but there was definitely something there that forced me to go back to the doctor and talk about it, and realize that this issue is a disease like any other disease, and you're not out there curing cancer by just doing therapy or praying harder or whatever it is. I mean, it has, there's a medical issue behind it, and so it needs to be treated medically, and
Yeah.
part of that is with medicine. So
And I want to go to something you were talking about, which is you can, a lot of people don't realize people who put on happy faces who have things that you have nothing to be depressed about, you know, may be more susceptible to depression,
sure.
right? Because, what's it all for, right? There are questions that come up and it doesn't have to make sense, right? You can have the house, you can have the family, you can have the faith, but you can still suffer and you can
Yep.
still not understand why it's happening, how it happened, what did I do wrong? There's sometimes no answers to that. And I just want to make sure people who are listening, don't think, I don't fit the criteria. There is no criteria. That's what we're trying to
Yeah.
say,
Yep.
right?
Oh
And,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, so as you were going through this, as you were kind of walking through it and, we're talking about careers and relationships and things, did you ever think of cutting back on something? Whether it was, let me take a step back from my relationship, or was it, let me stop working in this industry, or if it was, hey, I need to reevaluate life, I guess is what I'm
Oh,
asking.
yeah, absolutely. So so going back to 2012, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that happened around that time period with, getting diagnosed with depression and
Yeah.
the passing of my uncle who was like a grandfather to me. I also I was absolutely miserable at
Mm.
this law firm in DC. I wasn't happy with the work that I was doing. I felt like my career had really, and not just stalled, but I felt like it had gone backwards. Because I felt like, I mean, I was valedictorian of my high school. I went to an Ivy League college. I did really well in law school. I was doing really well at Miles. And so my career and the trajectory was always on the up and up. And then I get to this firm in DC, and some of it was I was sort of used to being a big fish in a small pond in
Mm.
Baltimore. And DC and Baltimore are two very different cities.
They are.
I go to DC and probably for the first time in my life, probably since college, I felt like a small fish in a
Mm.
really big pond. And I just wasn't ready for that. And layering on top of that some of the medical depression issues, I thought about quitting. I was like, this is not what I want to be doing. I'm
Mm.
not happy. I always thought, having a high paying, what on paper looks like a prestigious job would bring me happiness. And that was not the case at all. And so I was very, very close to quitting my job and just trying to figure out what it is I want to do with my life. I had a couple options. I was looking at possibly joining the Air Force. Actually, I was talking to a legal assistant here at Google about this earlier because he's in the reserves for the Navy. He's got to go to training soon. But I thought about joining the Air Force as an officer. I thought that would be exciting. I was always interested in sort of national security, defense kind of work, and started to really love travel. And I thought it would be a really cool adventure just to, do something totally different and travel around the world and have this interesting military career. But around that time, the Obama administration was cutting a lot of the officer ranks in various branches of the military. And so I made it pretty far along in that process. And then I got word that they were delaying things for several years. So I was like, all right, well, can't do that. The other option was my wife had gotten accepted to a fellowship program in Zambia in Africa. And we had spent a part of our honeymoon in Zambia. And she really wanted to do it. And I was like, you know what? Like, I don't like my career. So let's go do this together. I love animals and wildlife is kind of one of my big passions. And I was like, I'll just volunteer with animals in Africa, do some anti-poaching work, whatever it is. And just figure out what it is that I really want to do with my life. And I was about to do that when luck would have it that a recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, Amazon's looking to hire, at the time it was a real estate lawyer. And I didn't shop on Amazon back then. And this is way before Amazon or is what it is today. They had yet to turn a profit. The stock, I think, was like under 300. It's almost 2,000 now. They had released a Fire phone that was just ridiculed in the tech press.
I remember that.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was still pretty much mature startup phase.
Yeah.
But I got the note from the recruiter, and I thought to myself, it's kind of random. Never lived on the West Coast. This would be a cool opportunity. I really have nothing to lose at this point in my career, so why not? And so yeah, I mean that moment right there sort of rejiggered my career and put me on a totally different trajectory. And I certainly would not be at Google in the situation that I am today if it wasn't for that random happenstance.
Well, yes, random happenstance. You have to give yourself credit also for taking that leap, because honestly, especially when you're feeling that way, right? You're not sure. It's a little scary to do that, to try.
Yeah.
And you don't know. I mean, this is just as blind of a roadmap as it was when you first started law, it sounds like. And
Sure.
you're taking this
it is, but at the same time, I think when you feel like you have nothing to lose, that's when it's a little easier to take a risk like that, right? Because otherwise, at that point in my life, I just wasn't afraid of failure because I felt like I had already failed in a sense. I did feel like a failure in a lot of respects. And again, objectively, people might look at where I was and be like, oh, how can you be a failure? Again, you're at a decent law firm and you're doing well. So that's when it's easier. I mean, I think it's a lot harder for people to take those sort of chances when they feel like they have a lot to lose because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to fail. So yeah, no, I think that's a big reason why, and especially knowing myself and who I was and who I am, I don't think I would have taken that leap if I felt like I had a lot to lose.
So when you made that leap, right, you're in a new environment. For people who are not unfamiliar, right, mental health and actually talking about mental health like we are isn't very common. And so is therapy something that's one and done? Is it something that follows you throughout? What has it been for you, if you don't mind clarifying?
Yeah, no, definitely don't mind talking about this. It's definitely not a one and done type of deal. I think when you get the courage to finally admit that you're struggling with a particular issue, you definitely need to front load the therapy, and there's certainly more frequent sessions. But it's almost like, I mean, it's like if you're totally out of shape and you want to get really in shape all of a sudden, on the front end, you're gonna go really hard on the diet and go really intense on working out. But then at a certain point, you can kind of just maintain things. You shed all the excess weight, and so that's how I feel with mental health and therapy, where in the front end, you're definitely doing a lot more intense therapy. It's more regular. Now, over the years, it's definitely less and less. I mean, now I probably go, I don't know, 2 times a year just to sort of check in and make sure that everything's good. But it's not something that I ever see completely going away. There's always something to talk about.
But it's great to hear that you'd still check in. Like, it's not something that you would, want to be done with per se, but also the importance of it seems to have kind of hit you. I mean, you've gone through
Oh,
it,
absolutely.
right? And
Sure.
it's a wonder what, for us now being a little bit more adultish than youngish, right? Because I have recently done therapy and it was great for me. I needed an outside party because, family had been telling me everything's okay, it's fine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, what do you have to be depressed about or just upset about or whatever?
Yeah.
And, having that third party talk to them, right, as objective as they are, really helped me. But I wonder,
Yeah.
because I know I've gone, looking back, I'm sure there have been moments where I had been depressed or anxious or felt something in high school, in college. that it's a wonder what would happen if we had those resources available, or where it
Yeah,
wasn't so stigmatized, I guess, for kids to see someone, right?
absolutely.
I mean, in your experience, whatever it is, have you heard or seen young people go to therapy? Seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, and before we get to that, to hear that, and thank you for sharing, your experience and the fact that you've been to therapy. I think if you had told me this 10, 15 years ago, and we've known each other for 35 plus years, I would have been shocked because I mean, your dad is one of the most positive people that I know. Every time I see him, he's super happy and
Yeah.
he's always so supportive. And, you and your sisters have always also been super outgoing and super happy and always smiling. And so the old me before going through this experience, if I had heard that, I would have been like, really? Like,
Yeah.
seriously? Like, what do you have to be sad about? Like, what is
Yeah.
it that, but now being more mature and going through that whole experience, I there's no judgment whatsoever. Like
Right.
it totally makes sense. And yeah. And so, back to your question about kids, I personally don't know any, teens or preteens that are going to therapy, but it is my understanding. And a lot of it is just a cultural change
Yeah.
here in this country. That it is a lot more acceptable. Counselors, high school counselors, school counselors are more so on the lookout for these things. But going back to the whole cultural thing, yeah, those resources might be there.
Hmm.
But depending on your family situation or the culture you're coming from, it's an even harder burden or an extra hurdle to jump to seek out those resources.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm glad to hear that, things are getting better. Counselors are becoming more aware and on the lookout um, for kids. Because I think that's where if we can start planting those seeds early, it would be great. And I mean, to
Yeah.
your point about our family and my family, I lucked out, I think, in, my parents, my mom and my dad both are very happy people. And you're right. Old me would have been like, and I had bought with it myself of, what do you have to be so down about? What
Mhm.
is it? And, your parents, the initial reaction is pray about it, right? But
Mhm.
admittedly, when I had told my parents, hey, I think I want to see a therapist about this, they were supportive. And I don't know um, if 10 years ago, I would have gotten the same reaction. You know,
Yeah.
I think there's something about the times and people coming and stepping up and sharing their story that is making our community and our older generation a little bit more open to the idea of it. Doesn't mean it goes away. Doesn't mean it was easy. Doesn't mean I wasn't scared as all get out to tell them
Yeah.
this. But I think slowly people are seeing the effects of mental health and what
Mhm.
it can do. So I'm hoping, with stories like yours that come up and people are hearing it, people understand this. I mean, when you were young, because we talked a little bit about it earlier, but looking back, would you say that you probably could have talked to someone who would have helped to have been able to
Oh,
talk to someone?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if there was an environment where that was encouraged,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that, you guys hearing this today, when you have kids, help them, make it open and okay for them to get help and talk about it. Cause I think that's the whole thing. Everything we're doing is kind of for that. That's one of the reasons we have the show and we have we share these stories. Um, let's, Sebastian, one of the things I wanted to ask you, cause now you've kind of gone through this journey. You've done these things. You've had these experiences, right? And so many things have happened. You're here at Google now, rising star. None of this seems to have necessarily been planned. Like, as you said, people have reached out to you. I don't know if you saw Google or if they saw you, but like, are you where you want to be? Do you think that there's a next step for you? You're going to go to Europe next. I don't know. You're an adventurer guy, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. But like uh, right now, where you are, yes, you may be happy, and I absolutely think you are. But like looking at 5 years from now, you see yourself where you are? What do you see?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, I've always been somebody who always looks ahead. So what is the next step? What is the next chapter going to be? And I think one of the problems in doing that is it's hard to really appreciate and focus on the here and now. And I think for the first time in my life and my career, I, one, again, I love what I do at Google. I love the company. It's a fantastic place to be. Really cool opportunities. Get to travel the globe for work, work on some really cool projects. I'm really trying to focus on doing the best that I can do in this current situation and not looking ahead towards what is it that I want to do next. Because I think I've started to realize that I would have never gone looking for Amazon. The next Amazon may again sort of come looking for me. And so, so I mentioned I'm not, I'm not religious anymore, but I still read a lot of Buddhist philosophies. And one of the things that I love about Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy is that it tells you to really focus on the here and now. And one of the things that causes a lot of pain or problems in people's lives is that they always want something. They always want something more. And so I've taught myself to really appreciate what it is that I have now. I mean, I'm incredibly lucky to be at Google. I mean, this is one of the hardest companies to get hired at. I think officially we have like a 1% admit rate for people who apply for jobs here. And so I don't take this job for granted. I don't take, especially given the road that I've taken to get here, I don't take this situation for granted at all. So I'm really trying to focus on the here and now. Yeah, I mean, I don't see myself leaving Google, but I'm open to, if there's something cool, if Google wants me moving to Europe or Africa or Asia or whatever it is, I'm certainly, down for that at some point in the future. But yeah, I try not to focus too much on tomorrow. Just focus on, again, the here and now.
That's some great advice. I mean, I asked the question because some people actually have a thought, but
Yeah,
a great reminder that, to appreciate where we are right now at the same time. Otherwise, what's the purpose?
yep, exactly.
So before I let you go, we got two things to do. One,
Okay.
what is one thing you would recommend to our fellow listeners and dream chasers today?
Yeah, the one thing. So I mentioned to you that I read a lot, and there was a book that I just finished up, and one of the things that was in that book that really resonated with me was that it's actually okay to quit. It is okay to walk away from something, and I think a lot of us are just we don't want that embarrassment. We don't want that shame. We think that if you quit, it's a reflection on your character or who you are. But honestly, sometimes quitting is the best answer. Whether it's a job that you don't love or like for a whole host of reasons, or a relationship, or friendships that you might have. I mean, sometimes to make it to the next level, personally or professionally or whatever it is, it does mean quitting something, and that shouldn't be something you should be embarrassed about or shameful about. Sometimes it's the first step to launching yourself to that next level.
I love that. I love that. Because how many of us haven't held on to something too long, and when we finally let go, we realize there was something better waiting for us,
Yep. Yep.
you know? All right. It's that time. Time to get to know you a little bit better with some questions.
All right.
All right. We got 5 random questions to get to know you
Okay.
just a little bit better. All right. Randomly. Question 1. If you, this is appropriate. If you could be great at one sport, which would you choose?
Whew. That is a good question. I'm going to have to go especially since it's October and we just wrapped up the World Series. I was a huge baseball fanatic growing up. Like my dream was to be a pro baseball player. So I'd have to go with baseball. It seems like the contracts are, they're guaranteed and there's also a less likelihood of getting injured. So yeah,
This
go with
is true.
baseball.
I like that answer. I like that answer. All right. I mean, especially when the Nationals win. Can't be mad
That
at
was
that.
kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, living in DC, I was a Nats fan for a while, so it was cool to see
Yeah,
them win
that was
that.
awesome.
Still an Orioles fan, even though it's been hard the last couple of years.
It has.
Yeah.
Like that 14-year drought. Um, okay, you tell me if you want another question. I'm going to ask, what do you learn from the teenagers you know? Do you have
Yeah, I'm gonna
teenagers
have
that
to
you
do.
know?
I don't
That's
have
why I was like, wait a
teenagers that
minute.
I know.
Here, if you were on this side of the world, I think that you might be able to come up with some. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Uh, okay. What was the last thing you made by hand?
The last thing I made by hand. Oh God, this question's gonna get me in trouble because it's like constantly my wife's biggest complaint is that I don't like to do sort of like handiwork around the house. And I have a lot of friends who will make like cabinets or stuff like that, and she'll be like, "Oh, look what Dennis just did. Why don't you do that?"
Have you
Wow.
made anything?
And my
Despite all
dad's a
of that,
mechanic. No, and my dad's a mechanic, and like he worked with his hands all his life. I
have you baked anything? Have you cooked anything?
well, there we go. Okay.
Just trying to help you out, man.
So yeah, no, we get 3 free meals a day at Google, so I haven't cooked anything recently. Jeez. All right. Well, I think does like assembling something count?
I will take it.
Okay. Okay. So I bike to work. I live like 10 minutes away from the office, and so I had to build this like contraption on the back of my bicycle so that my dog can ride with me and my bike to go to work.
Oh, did you
So
use
that's probably the last thing.
did you use like a basket or something?
There's a basket and there's like a whole kit that came from Amazon to put it together. I was very proud of myself for putting it together. So
There you go. He put a kit together, guys. Give it to
there
him.
we go.
There you go. Number 3. What do you enjoy eating when you're alone?
So I'm really big into fitness. I try to eat really clean, but one of my weaknesses is Cool Ranch Doritos. I love Cool Ranch Doritos.
The best kind.
I
It's the
mean,
best
I
kind.
I don't indulge all that often, but when I do,
It's okay.
I love it.
You don't have to indulge all that often. It makes the one times you indulge even better.
Absolutely.
Even better. All right, number 4. I don't like that question. It was weird.
That,
All right.
Is that another teenager question?
No, yeah, I'm just skipping it. Okay, this is interesting. What makes a person exceptional?
Hmm. I would have to say, I mean, I think there are a lot of things, but the one thing, and I think maybe relevant to the discussions we've had today, is excelling at something that is totally outside of the norm.
Mm,
Whether it's not going the typical doctor, lawyer, engineer path, or not going a path that might be culturally acceptable or acceptable to one's family. I don't know. To me, I think that's something that makes somebody exceptional and super interesting.
I love it. I don't disagree with it. I'm with it. All right. The things he's come up with. All right. Would you rather, so this is the last question. Would you rather age forward or backwards from this point?
I would want to age forward, to be honest. Like I was talking to somebody about how excited I am for my 40th birthday coming up because that seems to be a big thing now. People doing these like crazy wild trips for their 40th
Yeah.
birthdays. And I don't know if it's a West Coast thing because people here tend to like not have kids or have kids much later in life and don't have less holding them down. But yeah, no, I'm like looking forward to hitting my 40s and seeing what life has in store. So yeah, definitely moving forward.
I like that. I like that. We were talking to someone else and I was like, you know, we're in our 30s, but I feel like I could be in my 20s. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
like there's no cutoff, but I feel like some people have already kind of put a stigma on, ooh, 40s, you're downhill from, why? Why?
No,
Who are
I
they?
look at it as being uphill. I mean, I feel like physically, mentally, everything, I'm better off than I was when I was in my 20s. So, yeah.
You're doing it, man. I'm so happy you were able to come on. Listen, thank you so much for everything, for your open and such an honest conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I was really excited to chat with you. I'm really glad we got to touch on some of the mental health issues. I mean, I think it's really important for that message and acceptability to get out there.
Absolutely.
Just because, I mean, it can save a lot of lives. You know, I've been there, so.
Yeah. So see you guys. Yeah. No, listen, very thankful. And guys, you can find all the show notes from today's episode over on the show notes page at amyj21.com/episode 210. That's episode 210. All right. Until next time, guys, keep chasing.